Hello all, and welcome to the Noetic podcast. I'm your host, Jordan, and I'm joined by...
CJ.
And today we're going to continue our seminar series on Michel de Montaigne's essays. And today we're going to cover chapter 21, titled Of the Power of Imagination.
So I'm going to preface this with a little tirade on Montaigne. Amanda Palmer, who is this really wonderful musician, has this book called The Art of Asking. And in it, she has this wonderful passage about artists and that they collect the dots and they connect the dots. That, in a sense, that is what they do. Montaigne, in these essays, does both rather well, but at varying degrees. And I think in this essay what we see is Montaigne collecting a lot of dots about the power of imagination, but that through all of those dots we seem to try to make sense of it. We try to find the thread that connects it, but it's really tough. And I know that in the essay he even mentioned that he has this trouble. Do you remember where that was, Jordan?
Sure. It's towards the end of the essay, and he says that there's a, quote, "There is nothing so foreign to my style as a continuous narrative." So I think with that, Montaigne has a lot of anecdotes, but I think that we should jump right in and try to make sense of his essay of the power of imagination.
Yeah, let's find that thread. Let's collect these dots and see what we can find about imagination. So he starts right off by giving us at least some overarching theme or characteristic of the power of imagination. And he starts off with his little quote from the clerks, whoever the clerks are. We're not really sure.
The
all-knowing, all-important clerks who say, "A powerful imagination begets the thing itself." And in a sense, he's saying that imagination is so powerful that it can create a physical condition in somebody. And Montaigne alludes that to himself, right? What was that one story of him?
Right. So he says that I'm a dutiful friend, and I went to go visit my sick buddy. And the doctor said, I think it would do him a world of good seeing you in a healthy, flush state, and with in your vigor, with all your vitality. And it had a placebo effect, right? Where the imagination has this ability to change your physical state from a weak and sickened one to a healthy and improved one.
And we're only talking about when you're awake, because then there's that point where if you're falling asleep, or at least you're in your dreams, it can still work on you. I mean, there's that, what is that story about the emperor with the horns, and he saw a bullfight yesterday, of course, and he imagined himself in a dream with horns, with bull horns, and then, sure enough, he wakes up, and he has the bull horns. So, I mean, this can work on you even while you're asleep, which is quite crazy.
Right. I think before we dive into that, I think that we should sort of touch on a little bit, if we go back to the first story about Montaigne visiting his sick friend.
Sure.
Because I think that another aspect of that we should look at is how Montaigne is afraid he'll become sick, and how Montaigne relates that if he's around someone that's sick, he begins to feel that condition. So that the first, I guess, main point or premise of this essay is the fact that the imagination can heal you, but it also can create an ailment. It can also make you sick.
Okay.
So the first, I guess point is the imagination can make you sick as well as equally better.
Right. Whether you're awake or perhaps even in a dream, that it can give you certain things.
Right. And so, yeah, and then on to your next point is it can affect your sort of physical condition even if you're asleep.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So it has a passive effect on you, even though you're not necessarily willing it. It can just happen to you.
Right. And I think that, you know, a certain point, and, you know, this graphic, so, like, earmuffs, kids. But, I mean, he talks about it with, like, nocturnal emissions, right? Of just getting so, like, worked up in this state while you're asleep. And, you know, yeah, you just, like, wake up with, like, your sheets a mess. It's just, I mean, Montaigne gets into some crazy stuff. So this is just the beginning, but it goes to show that your physical state can be at the mercy of your imagination.
Yeah, and even the example, if we can further, you know, keep the earmuffs on, of impotence in bed, mm-hmm. right? Because I think that touches on how one deals with the imagination, or at least the effect of it, mm-hmm. right? Because Montaigne has that friend who's unable to overcome the imagination that confronts him when he hears of a story of a friend who was impotent in bed, and he's so worried that maybe that could happen to him, that it happens to him, and then his mind
he like failed to perform. He just couldn't do it.
Yeah, so Montaigne talks a little further about that. Do you recall what he said maybe was a way to get out of that, or to maybe confront that power of imagination somehow?
Yeah, and I think that a big part of that is sort of an early exposure therapy. And Montaigne interestingly says, okay, you gotta just ride out that wave of terror or that moment of anxiety and just mm-hmm. acknowledge, okay, this is gonna pass, it's gonna be okay, it's gonna be okay, it's gonna be okay. And you gotta note the anxiety in the moment, because when he brought it up with his partner of saying, this is what I have this problem with, then it alleviated that pressure and took off a lot of that burden or that onerous element of the anxiety to perform.
So it's almost as if you're admitting that this imagination is having a power on me right now, and if you admit that to another person, or at least to the partner involved, then that alleviates the potency of the impotency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
right. And I think that it's a very real condition.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think we'll probably get into like a little bit more with the sort of with medicine and placebo effects, because you know, like Cialis and like Viagra all have, I think, like a pretty important role in helping overcome that anxiety mm-hmm. and that sort of hang-ups with your imagination. But there's also another element, in sort of, if we're in the sort of the sexual wheelhouse, is the story of Marie Germain, and how apparently she started life off as a woman, and then through the powers of imagination became a man and exposed himself mm-hmm. accidentally through some sort of physical exertion. So I think that Montaigne gives us an interesting range of sexual phenomena, ranging from like very, very real and you know, very close to home for a lot of people, to the improbable of transsexual I think transformations via imagination.
And I think what's really fascinating about that too is that, you know, even when we're dealing with that topic mm-hmm. of sexuality, that imagination ranges in different ways with each of those, right? Mm-hmm. Because with the Germain part, she started out as a woman and then willed herself, used the active power of imagination to become a man. Mm-hmm. But then we have the impotency thing, right? Mm-hmm. Where somebody's just saying, come on, I'm ready, but it's not working. Mm-hmm. So we have a disconnect, right? Mm-hmm. Where the will or the power of imagination is not working with the reason that one is trying to use to, bring forth some kind of potency in bed. And I don't know if that necessarily goes into the fact that maybe we can't will our will sometimes.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I would think that there are some things that are sort of beyond our control, but I would say an interesting sort of, I guess you could say like a female problem that I've heard about like once or twice, and I'll have to double check this, but I think it's called the phenomenon is called a hysterical pregnancy. And so when a woman wants to become pregnant so badly that she'll actually start to take on the signs and the symptoms of pregnancy.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And so she sort of wills that to happen. Wow. Okay.
So it's interesting. So in some cases we have instances where there's a disconnect between the will and the body, and then in the case of this hysterical pregnancy, that there's the instance of willing yourself into and using your imagination to create a physical condition.
And even that physical condition could be health, right? Because Montaigne talks about how doctors use a placebo effect in their own practice to heal people, that they know that, oh, well, since he's getting this medicine, he'll think that it's working, or that he'll think that he's recovering. And then that will just only make the healing process that much more acute, right?
Right, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's kind of like the idea of, I forget where I read it, but I've read that they've been doing a lot of studies on the use of humor and comedy in helping with a lot of terminal illnesses, and that patients that had done this sort of like humor and laughter therapy had a lot better, like reported better rates of like well-being because of that, almost like that sort of like placebo effect, right? Of stimulating your mind and your imagination of feeling good, and that actually sort of like showing up like physically. That's sort of a psychosomatic effect.
And this is really fascinating too, because Montaigne then brings this connection to animals, right? Because he says the power of imagination can then be used not on animals, but animals can use it themselves.
Yeah, and I think before we do that, I did want to bring up
Please do.
The one story of Montaigne's friend.
Yeah.
Of his friend freaking out. Was it about his wedding night, I think?
Could he have a good time that night?
Yep. Could he please his wife? So Montaigne, who's not a fan of trickery, he's not a fan.
He ain't down with that.
Nope, he's not down with that. And of quick and slow speech, he's not all about the smooth talking. Not a fan of that.
But he does that though, right? In this one example.
But this one example, he makes the exception to help his buddy out with this amulet. And he tells him, okay, like we're gonna switch nightgowns. You're going to take this amulet, which a doctor gave me to help out with headaches, which he doesn't tell the friend. But he takes this amulet that he got from a doctor, and he told his friend, okay, put on this amulet, say this prayer, the effect of, something to the effect of hop on one foot and, spin around 3 times basically, and then go to bed with your wife. And apparently, it must have worked. So,
yeah, and that's again coming from somebody who is skeptical of this already, right? Because he even sees religion and medicine as using this imagination somehow as a way to work on people that are unsuspecting, or perhaps, as he says, common people, right? So he's already calling it out in some respect that this power is working even in institutions or in certain practices that maybe we deem as working naturally just because they are powerful. But then he says, well, you know what? I kind of knew about it too. I know about this power, and I, sort of used it to help I was helping my friend, but, I think he says something along the lines of, like, even though the practice is not guile, the road to it is, right? That even if he was trying to help his friend,
exactly, he
was still trying to use trickery, or as he calls them, monkey tricks.
Yeah, exactly. But he says that these sort of like monkey tricks almost have this, even though they're like absolutely silly, they have a certain weight to them and sort of an air of reverence of sort of, like an old wives' tale.
Yeah.
Of, like, I don't know, like think about it like with like, when you wanted a snow day growing up, you do the pajamas inside out, salt on the windowsills, spoon under the pillow.
I don't think I did the spoon under the pillow.
Oh, well, I did. I really wanted snow days. I really wanted to get out of school. But it's those sort of things that, as a kid, and pretty much now, if I didn't have to shovel, I would, I would like, you carry out dutifully because it's like that ritualized aspect to it.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes perfect sense. And it's funny though, this might lead into the next point. But I remember one day on a snow day, my dog, for some reason, when we went outside, it ran out and it just stopped dead before it even hit the snow. It just looked at the snow, and I swear that the dog just turned around and just ran back in. Just like that. Like, it just looked at the snow and said, no
and just
thanks. Ran out, and we couldn't get that dog outside. It had to just, do its business inside. We had to it was just a lot of cleaning up and terrible things that had to go on. But there was just something about an impression that it had of the snow that made it terrified, right? And I think that's what Montaigne talks about. Maybe not of snow days and of dogs pooping indoors, but of imagination working on animals, or in the sense that animals might have imagination,
which is crazy.
Yes.
I mean, considering, classical tradition, all that stuff, Aristotle's like, oh, well, humans are so much better than animals.
Descartes just like, animals are robots.
Yeah, and like, so for Montaigne to postulate, and he does make a good point, of like, when you see your dogs like sleeping in bed and they like get all twitchy, like they're, chasing a squirrel in their dreams, yeah. So, and there is like some research out there to back that up, that dogs definitely do like dream in pretty vividly.
Yeah, and it's not only dreaming too that Montaigne talks about, but he also talks about the idea that they can exert imagination just like we do as doctors, or perhaps in religious views, or just in snow days. Like, animals do that too. I mean, what was that story that Montaigne had about the cat and the bird?
Oh, right, that the cat,
I can't remember,
allegedly killed a bird that it was just staring down because they both just
the evil
looked they both just like looked at each other, and either the bird through its own imagination just like just dropped dead, or the cat just like killed it with like one glance, kind of like a Medusa thing.
The cat had some sort of, I don't even know what kind of kinesis he just had mind powers.
Yeah.
Which is
mind powers. Cats.
Insane to think about, because that almost gives, like, because we think of the imagination as this human thing.
Yeah, and
I don't know if that makes animals that much more human. I mean, all I can think of, at least, is the David Foster Wallace essay we did of Consider the Lobster, where the lobster conveys human traits, or at least seems like it's feeling pain, is trying to get out of the bucket. So, obviously it must, there has to be some sort of connection there. Right.
So this is also another essay that is making me feel guilty about enjoying my food. But it does, I think, raise really interesting questions about, I would say, are humans that much better than animals, or are we just really just animals that can just really talk and like just vocalize about how strange and gross we are, and having control over farting, like he mentions.
Which he says is like, is that really that big of a deal? I mean, come on now. I mean, even not even control of our farting, but even to get a little more serious. I mean, he was talking about we have control of how we can make our babies.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's freaking crazy too. If we want to like get to like the extreme of the power of imagination that we can have, it's you can, if you have by force of will an image, as Montaigne uses, I think he has that woman look at a picture of St. John the Baptist, and she's just zooming in on that, and she's so focused that her baby comes out and it's all hairy like St. John the Baptist. I'm like, what? Like, that's a thing.
Yeah, that's just like, I don't know. I mean, it's
apparently that's the story, but
that's the story, and I think that Montaigne will question the validity of those stories after that. But I mean, kind of to your point about animals exerting their imagination on other animals, I mean, humans being able to do that to other humans, and then, I mean, like the transmission of like imagination from like mother to child, that is like next level.
Yeah, that's probably the extreme, I think, at least. And I think it's fitting that Montaigne ends the essay, at least of all the examples of all the dots that he sort of shares with us, that's the last one I think that he gives us. And again, it's one of those things that you just have to give pause and think about it. Like, do we really have that power? In the sense that, well, genetically speaking, we might get to the point where we are able to select our offspring. And is that a power of imagination, or is it science?
Right. And I think that, we definitely do have to at least consider the effect of, or I guess not the effect, but the relationship between science and the imagination now.
And that's exactly what Montaigne's talking about, right? Where he says, like, well, how much of it's science and how much of it is just you willing something into existence via your imagination, right?
Yeah.
Because you could have a theory and then use your imagination to will every result into what your theory is. There's a lot of work by Stephen Jay Gould about this, where he has this book called The Mismeasure of Man, and how a lot of these statistics of measuring skulls and of everything were actually used in a way to support a theory that was already there, one of a certain biological determinism and essentially of racial profiling using science, right? But that pseudoscience, right? And I think
definitely definitely pseudoscience.
And maybe that's another definition of pseudoscience, is that where the power of imagination is in fact
will results.
And we can see that in a lot of things, but I think Montaigne outlining that power in this essay to start, even if he has no idea about what we will, psychology and neuroscience, I think at least just giving the effect and saying like, hey, look at this. This is pretty freaking weird and crazy.
Yeah.
Then we can think about it now and really delve into the causes rather than just, dwell on the effects.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Montaigne, despite some of this kind of like mention of, magic and babies being hairy and birds falling out of the sky and willing farts into existence and just, like penile problems. I mean, he definitely gives some really excellent food for thought.
Yeah.
And just how strange humans are, and just how crazy human life and animal life is.
Yeah, and I think, like you said before, that humans and animals aren't that far apart, honestly.
No. I don't think so.
No. And if you animals want to listen to more, how about you check out our SoundCloud page, our YouTube page, and how about you download that damn app already? It's on the iPhone and the Android phone.
So Google Play and the App Store.
Perfect. But Jordan, thank you so much for talking about this. I think it's
Thanks,
wonderful to delve into this and to really take a gander at what it means to be human, and the imagination is just a part of it. And it's wonderful that we can share in this through Michel de Montaigne.
Yeah, absolutely. And so keep being imaginative party people, and we'll see you next week.